All right, what we're going to do here is we are going to work on our first assignment that deals with shape. And what you all have been given is this, where you have actually like this watermark on it, and that is so you can't just directly copy and paste the final image that we're going to create. Okay, so we're going to create the same thing here, but we're just going to download this file so we can use it to kind of like overlap everything. All right, so this will be our final product. What it looks like, the one that you all have is just that janky watermarked one, but that is what we are actually going to throw in to our setup here so that we can kind of see how to size everything. So we're almost tracing. All right, don't overthink the process of what we're doing today. It basically is all tracing. Okay, so when we look at an image like this and we think, okay, we're going to recreate this, but we're going to make it our own unique thing. To be totally honest with you, it's essentially made up of circles, okay? Made up of like some circles, even down here, like, or zoom out. These are just really large circles, the little mountains and stuff like that. Even the sun, even like our rolling hills here. And then it kind of gets a little washed up because you see like Rick's mouth right there, but you've got circles back there. And then we've got lines. And what we'll troubleshoot or how we get these curves on these flowers. So let's go ahead and get started with our overall project. This will go kind of on and off so that we can see where we're at. When we go about creating something like this, we could think about creating something from the back to the front. So we could start for overall background, and then we could work all the way to the foreground. We could start with the foreground with the flowers, and then make these circles, and then these circles, and the trees, and then those mountains, the sky, and then the clouds, and then our sun. So technically, it's totally up to how you perceive things in your documents or in your construction. But for me personally, what I would do is I would start things from the background and work forward. Okay, that's just how my brain works. And that's what we're going to do. And that will help some of our layering and getting like used to how everything stacks up here. All right, so we are going to take full advantage of our layer lists and our tools today. We are going to introduce some new tools. Any of the tools that I introduce that are new, I will make sure that they are listed on our classroom site with this assignment. Okay, but I will talk about where they are as well so that you can review that. You can stop the video, look for the tool, find the editing. But you'll find a lot of this kind of repeats itself. And there are several different ways you could actually construct some of those items. So let's get started. Down here at the bottom right-hand side, we see new layer. We're going to use that a lot. Over on the top left-hand side, we have the rectangular, it's called the marquee tool, but as far as Photopea goes, it calls it rectangle select. All right. I call it the marquee tool because that is what Photoshop classifies it as. So what we're going to do within our layer one is we are going to create, I'm going to click and drag just to the size of my workspace here. And you can see it's highlighted there. I've clicked and dragged, and now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this entire space with that blue. You could switch over to your brush and then switch here to the color picker. And what's really cool about the color picker is, yes, we could try to find this and try to match it, Or you could bring it over and select, and now you have the color. Well, let's say from what we know, painting, right? It would take a minute. But what if I want to do things a little bit faster? I'm going to edit and undo. If I want to fill this space faster, what we're going to utilize today is underneath the gradient tool. So if I click and hold, I can go down to the paint bucket. And you'll see the quick command for the paint bucket is the letter G. I'm going to click that there. What do you know? Total background. All right. I'm going to deselect this selection. And on a Mac, it is Command D. On a Windows-based computer, it is Control D. You should also be able to right-click and deselect if you're on Photoshop. But here within Photopea, doesn't work. So we have to hit Command D or Control D. Just for our sanity, I'm going to rename this layer to be our sky. So double-clicking on the actual word, I'm just going to call it sky. I'm going to turn it off so we can see our image. Okay. The next thing in our image that's in the background is the sun and these clouds. So let's do the easy one first. We could go in with an ellipse tool and try, you see there, it's totally an ellipse, right? How do we make it a perfect circle? If you hold Shift, it keeps the constraints of the perfect circle. And then if I let go of Shift and move this, I could try to fit it in there and be the same size. Or I'm going to hit Command D or Control D to deselect. Why not make our lives easy? A brush is circular. And as long as we have our brush hardness up at 100%, I'm going to click off of that, then we could make this be the same size. So I'm going to take a selection. And if I use quick commands, right bracket on my keyboard will allow me to make this the right size. And it's not quite the same size, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. Now, what's the issue? The issue is that Photopea is not as kind as Photoshop. If we were on Photoshop, it would not have let me do this. And what it did was it let me edit on an image that was not turned on. Not cool. So I'm going to go edit and undo. And I'm going to start a blank new layer. And I want for this sun to live on its blank new layer. There we go. And I'm going to title that sun. I'm going to start a new layer. You can leave the sun on if you want. Doesn't really matter. But with this new layer, this is going to become my first cloud. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Like some of my proportions are a little bit different. It's like 6F is going to be total white. And I'm going to place my first circle right here. I'm going to shrink that down with left bracket. We can't really see what I'm doing there until we do that. And I'm actually going to make some creative decisions here. There we go. Add a little variety. So far, this is what we have. And if I turn my image on here and I turn everything off except my cloud, there's my cloud. I'm on layer 1, which is actually my cloud. All right, I'm going to rename that cloud, just for our sanity. Now check this out. This blue cloud is the same thing. Magical, right? So I want to duplicate this layer, and then I'm going to change it to blue. So I can take this cloud, and I could go down and drag it to the new layer here and it will duplicate itself. Cloud copy. Or if we want to learn quick commands, Command J on a Mac and Control J on PC. And we can't see it, right? So we're going to use our Move tool. You see too, I've got Auto Select selected here. So whatever I click on, it actually grabs. And I'm going to move that right up here. But before I move it to that space, this blue cloud's a little smaller. So I'm going to grab the Transform tool and shrink that down. You'll notice if you grab from a corner, though, you can kind of flatten and make it all sorts of craziness. I want to hold Shift on my keyboard and try to drag this down naturally. Cool. I like to uncheck transform controls once I'm done. And this is just utilizing something that is kind of making up for the inability to use Control or Command T to transform in Photoshop. We're utilizing this a lot more than we would if we were using Photoshop. All right, so currently this is white and we want it blue. We could do a couple of things. We could take a selection with our magic wand and select this, or we could copy everything on this layer by holding Command or Control on your keyboard and selecting this little box. So Command or Control selects the whole box there. And then we can take our brush. I'm going to zoom in for a second. So I can actually take my eyedropper and select that blue that's in there. And I'll switch back to my brush and paint in. All right, to get rid of those, Command or Control D, and that deselects. Let's see what we've got now. Wow, not too bad. All right, let's turn off everything except for this. You'll notice that I'm stacking, right? My layers over here on the right-hand side, those matter how they are arranged. So we'll play around with that here in just a minute. Just for fun for me, since this is kind of a more simple image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the middle ground, I'm going to build the background, and I'm going to build the foreground. And then what we're going to do is we'll come back and we'll build the trees and build the flowers. Just a lot of repeating process. We're just selecting specific layers and specific sizes over here. Okay, so let's start by creating a new layer. And I'm going to work from the foreground backwards. We'll make sure everything's layered up there correctly. All right, so let's start over here. We're going to start on this one. So first thing I'm going to do is grab that color, the eyedropper, grab my brush. And again, it helps to know the quick commands. Okay, quick command to make the brush bigger, right bracket. And I'm just going to make that bigger until it fits in that space. Now I did zoom out right there with Command minus for a Mac and Control minus for a PC. That looks pretty good. Make sure that you are painting on your new layer. Not your background, not your sky, not your sun, not your cloud, not your cloud copy, a new layer. Now here's what's tricky. This is the closest, I'm just going to type close. This is our closest hill, per se. Let's get this one right behind it. Now, if I do this and grab my eyedropper, grab that color that's there, grab my brush, right bracket to make it bigger. This is pretty big. And I click. Well, this is the wrong overlapping. This is actually supposed to be behind this. Well, what's cool is we created two different layers. In the closest hill, we just take this new hill and drop it below. So all that was a click and a drag. Wait for that grayish, blackish line to be right between there. Behind close hill. Ironic, right? Okay, let's go in here and we're going to start making some of these circles. Wanted to make sure I didn't make that too big. All right. So as far as these circles go, they're pretty simple as well. Let's grab our eyedropper, grab that color, which is a darker green, and I'm going to start a brand new layer. And I'm going to call this mid hills. They're all going to go on the same layer. Now, if I have my brush here, it's really, really big. I don't know if you can see that, but kind of like on the edge, it's huge. It looks like it's 800 pixels. That's massive. Left bracket, we'll bring that down and make it smaller. That looks good. So I'm going to click. You can see it's on top, but I know I'm not on my behind close hill, so it's okay. All right. We have one here. Looks like that's a little bit bigger. One there and one there. Now for my sanity, I want to attach these. I just want to make sure that they're all attached here. It's not necessary, but I think it'll be nice, just in case. Now this looks terrible, right? So let's take our layer and drop it behind close hill. You can see that on behind close hill, I accidentally moved that over a little bit. So now I'm going to bring it back. All right, let's do our trees, and then we'll finish with these hills right here in the background. All right, so for our trees, all this is, this circle we will create this line, and then you're duplicating the circles, creating a line here and here, and then this whole subject is duplicated and enlarged over here. So let's get to working on that. I'm going to take, it automatically had me on here. I'm going to open up a new layer and just call it tree. You don't have to, this is just the way that I kind of remember where I'm at. So grab my eyedropper, and I'm going to create this darker side of the tree first. There are several different ways we can make this, but for me, this works the best. All right, so we've got our green, right? Fantastic. Now, what's interesting is we want to take this green and we want to cut it in half. So let's check out some magic here. I'm going to switch over to my rectangle tool, a rectangular marquee tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Command and click right on here. Now, if you're on Windows, it's Control. So Control and click. We can see it's highlighted this whole space here. Okay, that's good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch over, and instead of replacing that space or uniting, we're actually going to subtract. All right, I'm going to use this line and zoom in, Command plus or Control plus. I'm going to use this line right here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to click and drag and just cover the space there that I don't want edited. And you can see it's unselected this area. Okay. Let's go in with our eyedropper, and we're going to select the new color we want, the brush, and then we're going to paint. See how it's changing? Awesome. Now here's what's cool. Let's hit Control D or Command D and deselect. Here's what's cool. That is new. That's our new circle right there. I'm going to hit Command Z just to return where it was. All right. We want to duplicate this here and here, but we want them smaller. And this is where it may get a little confusing. We're going to duplicate this 2 times. So Command J or Control J. And I've got my new circle here. I want to shrink it down though. It's way too big. Transform tool. Holding Shift. Making it smaller. Doesn't have to be precise. Just close enough. There we go. And I'm going to remove that. Okay. I'm going to hit Command or Control J again. And that duplicates. And I'm going to bring it over. Now I did move to my Move tool. And that allowed me to move that item over. These are both the same size. All right. Notice that we have tree copy 2, tree copy, and tree. So that's these 3 items. All right, we still have one more thing we need to make. We want to make the trunk of the tree. We actually have 2. And we want to make these wimpy little branches, right? Okay. So let's go in with our rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to start a new blank layer. And that's going to be the tree base. It feels like that's a lot of layers right now. We're going to consolidate them in just a minute. All right. I did use the glove tool with the space bar to move my item earlier. All right, I'm on the marquee tool. And if you're on the marquee tool and you haven't switched away from the subtract, like what we were using earlier, it's not working the way that we want it to. So I'm going to hit Command D on a Mac or Control D on your Windows. I'm going to switch that to replace, and I'm going to fill that in. Now I'm going to use brown, right? I'm going to take a selection. Let's do the dark brown. Grab my brush. B is for brush. There we go. Now what I want to do is I want that lighter color. So let's go in and grab that. Move tool. Gonna move it up. And here's what's cool. I want these lines to come together. So I'm gonna take this marquee tool, switch it to subtract, and try really hard to get those to semi-line up. I actually want it to go on that side. All right. My new color, brush. Now, how do we finish? Command or Control D will deselect. I'm going to paint these 2 lines on the same layer, and then we'll be good to go. I'm going to use a trick with my brush. And I want to use the color right here, this dark brown. So I'm going to take my brush, and I actually want to make the size really small. In fact, 3 pixels is still too big. So about 2 pixels. What's cool is I'm going to show you here real quick. If you click somewhere and then you hold Shift and you click again, it will unite that. Okay? So if I click somewhere and then I let go and I hold Shift and I click somewhere else while using the brush tool, it will unite the two dots. All right, so I'm going to click in this space right about here, hold shift, move, and click. Looks great. I know it's over top right now. Trust me, we'll get it. I know this is over top too. This line right here, maybe let's go in and grab this lighter color. Switch back to our brush. Start here, click, shift, click. Wonderful. All right, let's do some organizing and we'll put these together. This is my tree base. And I want to take my tree base below all of the parts of my tree. There we go. I understand that this is still sitting above, but that's okay. We can fix it. Here's where we're going to get complicated. Tree 2, copy, and tree are going to go all the way and they're going to get compressed to tree base. So we're going to have that tree as one item. Now, as we go along in our class, we'll end up using groups a lot more, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to just compress all 4 of those layers. If you're on a Mac, you can hold Command and you can select those 4 items. If you are on a PC, you hold Control and you select those items. Notice how I'm clicking here and not on the actual font. Okay, how do we compress all of these to be one item? Well, let's right click right over here in this space and merge layers. There we go, there's our tree. If you didn't have all 4 of those layers selected correctly, maybe you had the entire image selected or no images selected at all, it may accidentally select everything and compress everything. If that happens, you'll want to undo. All right, my tree is still sitting up here on top of this like bush that it does not need to. So let's sink it behind that. So I'm going to bring it down and I'm going to bring it down again. And you can see it tucked in right there. Okay. Let's go in here and we're going to make a duplication of our tree. So Command or Control J, or you can drag and drop it on that layer. And then we can use our Move tool. I'm pulling it up here. I'm going to turn off my background and turn that sky on so you guys can see a little bit better idea of what I'm doing. Now, if I stick this here, they're the same size, and I don't like that. So I want to take the Transform tool with this item, and I'm going to bring that and make it really, really big. So I'm going to hold Shift and enlarge that. Now, I would personally also like to see this tree in front of these 2 little bushes. So I'm going to look at my layer list, Mid Hills, and I'm going to bring that right there. And I think aesthetically that just looks a little nicer. Okay. So visually, we have almost everything. We still need the 2 hills back here, and we need the flowers in the foreground. Okay? So I'm going to turn off my sky there and turn on my little Rick background. All right. If I think forward about where everything is in relation to one another, I don't have to create something up here for those backgrounds. I can look at my layer list and say, you know what? A new layer of these background mountains should go right above the sky because it needs to be in the back. So, background mountains. I'm going to grab the eyedropper, take a selection of those mountains, grab my brush, and you can see there it was like 2 pixels. Now it needs to be really big. 500. Huge. And they're both the same size. There we go. And I'm going to shrink that brush down just for my sanity. Okay. So technically, that's how they look right now. If you wanted to move these around and lower them, maybe make them just look a little bit better. That looks a little nicer with the intersecting of that tree. It also just boosts that tree up a little bit. Again, the auto select is on, so anytime I click on a specific item, it moves that item around instead of just the layer. Okay, well, we have one more thing that we need to create, and I'm just going to turn everything off in my image with the exception of the background. The last thing that we're going to create is this flower, all right? And the flower is the same flower over and over and over. Super simple, very easy. It's just rotated and flipped, okay? Because there's no shading on these flowers, so it's not that bad. We're going to do something very similar to what we did with the trees, okay? We're going to create two flowers, turn them into one item, and then we're just going to flip them. So let's look at our layer list. I'm going to go up to the top, and the very, very top one, I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to call that flower, just for our sanity. All right, let's grab the eyedropper, get that pink. You can see there, our brush is a little bit too big, still too big. That looks great. So that I can see the flower, I'm just going to create it over here. We're going to be able to move it around, so it's not a big deal. Now, here's the tricky part. The tricky part is that we want to make this green on another layer. So this is going to be my flower base. Eyedropper, get that nice dark green, switch back to my brush. So that I can see the results, I'm on two different layers here. So I could just paint right over it. Now, when you look at that, though, it's actually a little bit big for me. There we go. I could have made those on the same layer. It just would have been really difficult. And what I'm about to do is going to make my life really, really easy. Let's look at a new tool, and it's called the polygonal lasso. It's under the lasso tool. Click and drag to that tool. And you can see we've got this nice hard edge here. So I'm going to click. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just look for the semi-center area. Click and click. Now we want to finish this out and connect them. If you're having trouble getting those to connect, I always start off of an area. And if you do something like that, you've missed, right? Command or Control D, deselect, work it again. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. All right, let's grab our eraser. First time we've ever used this tool. E for eraser. And that has our selection. Now, Command D or Control D will deselect. And I'm just going to fit that in. If you want to enlarge it, use your transform tool. Enlarge it a little bit. Put it into place. You can say you're good with that. Okay, so my flower is almost done, but the pink area needs to get cut, right? Well, now that we understand about the eraser and we understand this fun little tool that makes straight lines, we could go over here and we could just cut the top of our flower and erase it. I'm going to leave a little bit more of my flower available there. That doesn't look too bad. Eraser, E for eraser, and Command or Control D. All right. We're really close. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two objects and I'm going to merge them together. So flower base and flower, they're on their own layers there. So I'm going to hold Command or Control and click. Those two are both selected. Right click and merge layers. And I'm just going to title that flower. The rest of the flower parts can all be made on that same layer. I'm just going to take a mental note that there are 2 dots on each side, and there's a little like curved line. And I don't want to see Rick's face anymore. All right. Luckily, I have the auto select turned on. So this is what we're looking at. Great. I'm going to zoom back in with Command or Control plus. And I want to at least be able to see most of my space. Okay. Now that we are on to our final part, I'm going to shrink down this brush to about a 2 pixel or 3 pixel. And I want to make the stem first, and then we're going to make the 2 pink dots. I'm actually going to take it up to 3 pixel. We haven't talked about this really yet, but smoothing is one of the best tools within your paintbrush. If I just click and drag this down, honestly, that wasn't a bad job. Some of you that have trouble like with your brush may look something like that. If you're having issues making a nice line, bring that up to 100%. Click and drag, and it will take a second, but it will curve. Let me try that again. I want a little bit of an arch. Wonderful. If that's not large enough, we can make our pixels bigger. I'm going to make it a 4 pixel. And just for my sanity, I'm going to change that back down to 0. Okay, I want the 2 dots on my flower. A dot and a dot, still staying at that 4 pixel. If you wanted to bring it down, you can, but I think that looks nice. Just a nice little change. Okay, our entire image here has been created as far as our flower is concerned. So we just need to take this flower and duplicate it a couple times. So I'm going to start with the first flower over there, and I'm going to duplicate that layer. Cool. I'm going to transform it, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And now I want to flip this. So if we're on our move tool, sometimes if you right click, you can actually get your item to show up and to flip. It's not happening for me, so I'm going to force it to, and we'll go over to Edit, Transform, and flip horizontally. Cool. Now for over here, we're essentially just going to do the same thing. If you wanted to get really crazy, you could select both of these and duplicate them together and then resize. I'm going to go the long route and I'm going to start by taking this one with Command J or Control J. I'm going to shrink this down. It's going to be a little smaller. And then I'm going to make another one over here, Command J, flip it horizontally, and I'm going to make it just a little bit larger. And also I'm going to rotate it a little bit so it doesn't feel like we have the same image. Now I'm going to rotate that one a little bit too. Move tool. Great. Command or Control 0. And that's our final product. Okay. These are all of our layers here. We have quite a few. But initially, pretty simple build up for us. Just took us a little while to make, but not bad. When you save, if you want to save throughout your project, definitely should save as a PSD file. And I should have mentioned that earlier, just in case anything crashed. But our file that I want you to submit to me, file, export as, and PNG. Okay, make sure that quality is at 100, and then you will submit that file to me. If you all have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll try to make things a little bit easier for you.